noticed that summer has started?
Yes.
There is green stuff everywhere. Oh my gosh. The other day I thought, where's the fire? It's foggy, and then I noticed I couldn't breathe, and then it was all over everything in the house and in the car. Yeah, it's beautiful stuff. Summer is here. Summer of 2018, and this summer we're going to do something which I think is really exciting and something just a little bit different. We're going to take a look at some of our favorite movies. And we're going to look at different movies throughout the summer season, and we're going to dive into some of these films because, you know, films are a great way for families to connect and for friends to get together, but there is also God's truth in most films. We just have to look a little bit, dig a little deep, and have them uncovered for us. And so this morning we're not going, we're going to look at a movie that is somewhat recent and somewhat popular, but actually the story goes all the way back to the year of 1862. So it's a story that has a pretty long life to it. The story was written by a man by the name of Victor Hugo, and the novel that he first wrote was called Les Misérables. And I know you've all heard the name, even if you haven't read the book or seen one of the numerous movies. But Les Misérables is in French, and in French it means the miserable ones, the pitiful, the poor. And Victor Hugo wrote this novel out of a deep concern that he had. He was championing a great cause that he thought needed a voice during his time, because you see, in France during this time, a large percentage of the people were living in extreme poverty. So extreme that they literally did not have food to eat. And this poverty had been going on for years leading up to the time that he had decided to write this novel. And his whole goal was to raise awareness of the people who were living in such horrible conditions. He wanted it to inspire them as well as those people who were making decisions in the government, and hopefully to act differently, to act with more mercy. And what's kind of amazing is that this novel became an instant hit. It was spread all around the world. In his 1,500-page novel, which I'm sure you're all going to run out and purchase tonight so you can get started on it, can you believe that it became so popular that it was translated in all sorts of different languages and spread around the world? 1,500 pages. And his message became so powerful and so moving that by the time of his life, he was declared a national champion, a hero. And at his funeral, 3,000 people showed up to pay their respects. Les Misérables has been translated over and over. It's been adapted to films more than 50 times. The musical version of Les Misérables is one of the most popular musicals of all time. The music inside of it has inspired people. There are soundtracks and clips everywhere. It's really inspired a whole movement of mercy. And so when you put the story together with the music that has been adapted, it really is a beautiful picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ. What's so moving is that not only is this story comes from 1862 and a real-life situation that was happening in France, but it's a story that's more than 2,000 years old. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of mercy. And it's a story of grace. So let me walk you into this novel so we can get prepared to see our clip and continue with our message this morning. In the beginning of the novel, Victor Hugo, he writes about a bishop, a priest, a man in the church. And in this scene, he has the bishop going into his study, and he's reflecting, and he's meditating, and he's writing notes, and he's thinking about upcoming sermon messages, and he's dwelling upon the story and the words that God has for him to hear. And on this particular time, he's meditating on the names of God. And so as he says them out loud, he jots down some notes. And so he says the name Almighty, Creator, Liberty, Immensity, Wisdom and Truth, Light, Lord, Providence, Holiness, Justice, God, and Father. And every time he says these words out loud, the names of God, he writes down his heartfelt thoughts. And then he writes last but not least, the most beautiful name of all of God's names, Misericord, which means mercy. And as the bishop says these words, Victor Hugo is really giving you an insight into the theme of the rest of the book and really into the message that he truly wants us to hear, that God's mercy is beautiful. It's beautiful to the sinner who's willing to confess their sins and then be open to receiving the transformation power of God's mercy and grace. It's a beautiful gift that's offered to all, regardless of what their perceived worth is in the world. He says mercy is never free. Mercy is very, very expensive. Mercy requires paying the cost of justice, and it's the cost of our Savior's life. Mercy is beautiful. And to those who are given the grace to see God's mercy, it changes their lives. So this novel that was written back in the 1800s, actually the story begins in 1795. And it's the year of the French Revolution. And as I told you, during this time of the Revolution, there was great poverty everywhere. People literally did not have food to eat. They were starving. And because of their state and their malnutrition, there was a lot of disease that was spreading throughout the country. And people were dying. The leading character, his name is Jean Valjean, and he's 25 years old at the start of this story. He's living with his sister, and his sister has 7 children. And he's the only one who has some sort of way to get out and earn an income so that he can buy food for the entire family to eat. And so he's not a humble man. He'll do whatever he has to do. He'll lower himself to do whatever he can possibly come up to, being a crop hand or a teamster, a laborer, whatever he can do. During this particular season, it's a very severe winter, and there's no work to be found. And so finally, in desperation, Jean Valjean leaves the home, leaves the 7 hungry children, and he goes into town, and he tries to barter and bargain, but that doesn't work. And so Jean Valjean is confronted with becoming something he had never desired to become, a common thief. He breaks the window of a bakery, and he steals a loaf of bread, and he runs, but he gets caught. His punishment is 5 years hard labor for stealing a loaf of bread. And while he's in prison, he tries to escape from the harshness, the reality that he's living in. And because of each time he escapes, he gets caught, his sentence gets prolonged. And at the end, he's in prison for 19 years for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his nieces and nephews. When he's finally released, it's now the year 1815, and he's 44 years old. He's given citizen papers to which he's to show people wherever he goes, and when he does, they realize that he is a convicted felon, and they turn him away. They will not give him a job, they will not give him food, and they've turned him away from housing. And so he's taken to the streets. So he's out in the streets, and on this one particular occasion, he finds a bench to sit on, and a woman comes to him, and he's awoken, and she says, "There is one place that will take you in." And this is where Jean Valjean meets the bishop. And this is where Jean Valjean has his life changed. Let's watch this clip. In Jean Valjean's most desperate moment, the bishop invites him in. The bishop gives him some food. He blesses him and the food for dinner. He gives him a place to sleep that's comfortable and safe and warm. And in return, Jean Valjean, during the middle of the night, realizes in a dream that he is who he is because the world has put a stamp on him. The world has marked him, and there's no way out for him. He's driven to living the life that he thinks the world has caused him to live, and that there's no way out. He steals the silver, and he heads back out into the world. But he gets caught. They bring him back. And what's expected by the entire world, including Jean Valjean, and even the nuns who were there with the bishop, what the entire world expected was, there's no hope for this man. But the bishop had hope. The bishop gave hope. And the bishop returned to him what everyone thought he had stolen, and even added to it, and sent him out into the world. Did you see the story of the gospel in that movie? So many times in our own lives, from times we are cut off when we're driving down the parkway coming to the beach, or when a coworker takes credit for work that when we've done, or a friend undermines our trust, revenge makes its appearance in our lives. When we've been wronged, we want justice. The wrongdoer must be corrected. They must be punished so that they will stop the error of their ways. They must be told that they are wrong. Books in our Old Testament of our Bible say the same thing. Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, they all say the same thing. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. We justify all of our revenge and all of our envy and all of our jealousy and all of our retribution, and we act like we're being holier than thou. This bishop is certainly justified to just have John Valjean committed for the rest of his life. I gave you everything. I tried to give you warmth, and I gave you food, and this is how you treat me? Jesus said something in the Sermon on the Mount that the bishop heard, and that the bishop is living out. Jesus said, "You have heard it that was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go a mile, then go also the second mile." The bishop has been robbed. The church has been grievously attacked. He has every right to see this man put in prison. But that's not what the bishop does. The bishop follows what Jesus taught. He shows the man mercy. Mercy. Why? Is it simply the act of doing good and being good and getting credit for being good? Why would Jesus tell you that when somebody strikes your cheek, we're supposed to turn and give them the other as well? Why would he tell us that when someone wants something, we should give them even more than what they ask? I mean, how is the world going to survive if we keep giving away all our stuff? Jesus knew there was a different way and a deeper reason. Jesus said the only real possibility of transformation in this world, the only real possible transformation that's going to happen in your brother and in your sister and in your neighbor is when we don't return evil for evil. Is when we return a blessing instead. The Apostle Paul said in his letter to the Romans, "If your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this, you will be heaping burning coals on their heads." Now, no, he wasn't talking about hurting them by throwing hot coals at them. He was talking about making such an impact on their lives that they could not resist it, that they could not dismiss it. You see, what happens is when somebody wounds us and we bless them instead, then we're doing like what Paul said. We're treating them with something that they actually were not expecting. And they can't miss it. Maybe they'll begin to feel a little bit of shame. Maybe they'll begin to feel a little bit of guilt. Maybe something will start and stir inside of them that they cannot dismiss. Maybe the Holy Spirit that's already been planted there, the voice will get louder and louder and louder in their lives. Maybe that's the moment that they begin to question their lives and what they're doing and the decisions that they're making. Maybe that's the moment that their life begins to change. And if all of those things don't happen, well, at the very least, it's very hard for someone to stay angry and mad at someone who's treating them with love and respect and blessing. Jean experiences the greatest love and mercy, and he had never, ever experienced that. The look on the actor's face tells it all when he just simply does not know what to do or what to say when he receives what he completely was not expecting to receive. Victor Hugo's story goes on, and this character's life is completely changed from this moment forward. I don't know if you caught the speech that the bishop gave at the very end. I know he was singing, and for some of you, you're thinking, oh no, he's singing again. But it was a musical. Something I have to tell my children when I show a musical to them as well. Dad, all they did was sing. That's a musical. But the bishop gets to the very end of actually having an interaction with Jean Valjean, and he says to him a very biblical phrase. And I think he said it to be right in Jean Valjean's face, so he could not miss it. He gives him something back that he wasn't expecting, and then he says, I have saved your soul for God. It tells him that he is worth something. And that his life, no matter how he's been treated, no matter what he's been told, has value. And that it's worth saving. Jean Valjean is probably all worked up in crazy emotion as well as questions in his head. Why are you doing this? What are you expecting out of me? When are you going to turn me in again? How is this all going to work? And then when he says, I've saved your soul, he's transformed. You know, the Christian gospel is a story in itself, and the plot of the gospel says that when we look at the cross, we realize we have worth as well. We have worth because we've been paid for it. We've received the finest silver we could ever receive. You know, today, this weekend, we're celebrating Memorial Day weekend. We're barbecuing and we're eating hot dogs and we're chilling together with people and we're going to the beach and we're shopping and we're all having fun and we're smiling faces and we're laughing. But there's a whole generation of people who are mournful on this day. Mournful because the reason we truly celebrate Memorial Day is to remember people who died. People who sacrificed. Perhaps instead of having a party, we should have a memorial service. But sadly, the older generations are becoming more and more disgruntled because the younger generations are farther and farther away from these events. And the younger generations aren't really taking to heart the price that was paid and the sacrifice that was made. And I've heard some older people in those generations say, oh, these young people, they don't understand, they don't appreciate. And then I think of us in the church. Do we appreciate the price that was paid for us? The price that was paid for our souls? The ultimate sacrifice that God made in giving us his Son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross because of us, who didn't deserve the penalty that he took, but he took it on our behalf. When we look at the cross, we need to remember that we have value, we have worth, and the price has been paid. It's the same picture that's played out in this powerful movie. It's the same picture that Jean Valjean sees when he looks into the bishop's eyes and sees that he has worth. I would imagine that Jean Valjean looks in the bishop's eyes and he says, I have to live differently from this day forward because of what this man just did for me. You and I, as followers of Jesus Christ, have to look at the cross. And we have to say that we're going to live differently from this day forward because of what that man did for us. You have worth. You have value. And he paid the price. He bought you. means that we live differently. We don't return evil for evil. We don't seek revenge and retribution. We don't let the green eye monster of jealousy rear up in our lives. No, we always return blessings. Always return mercy and grace. You know, it is the start of the summer season, and I'm reminded about an activity that I see as I drive around the area. What for me tends to mean summer is all the yard sales. Do you ever notice you drive around town and people put all this stuff that's old, broken, outdated, disgusting stuff that probably should have been in the garbage can? No, they put it on display in front of their homes. And people drive by and they look at it. Some people spend their whole weekend going from sale to sale to sale to sale, looking for that hidden treasure somewhere. Well, this is not me. I have to admit, it's not my thing, if you will. But then I see, come the end of the day on Saturday, that people have actually shown up at my neighbor's house and things are missing. Somebody came and pulled out a quarter or 50 cents or $1 or whatever it was, and somebody found treasure in what I thought really should have been in the trash can at the curb. And they took it home with them. I was reminded recently, I read a brief article about yard sales and the church. Every week when we gather here, this is God's yard sale. All of us here in this room, we are people who are broken. We're a little bit worn. We've been rejected by somebody, somewhere in our lives. Some of us may feel a little outdated. Maybe in our own mind and in our own thoughts that we don't think we're worthy. We don't think we appeal to the world. We don't think we're very popular. But God comes along. And he sifts through all that stuff, and he knows everything. He knows everything that you've confessed to, and he knows all the stuff you haven't confessed to. He knows all the stuff that you're hiding in your closets. All the stuff that's buried in your basements. All the stuff that's tucked away in the attic. He knows all of that, and yet he still comes every Sunday, and he greets us, and he loves us, and he buys us. He says, I see a treasure in you. And with the price of my son, I've paid for your soul. I see something worth saving in you. When the bishop says that to Jean Valjean, his life has changed. May today you hear God's voice say that same thing to you. I see something worthy in you, and I'm going to buy you. I'm going to take you home. And you and I, we're going to live differently tomorrow than we did yesterday. May God's people